Hey guys, so I'm going to talk about graph databases and mostly about when crunching numbers is just not enough. The overall theme of this talk is in a scenario where we have been conditioned to obey numbers rather than the behavior, and graph databases get you closer to the behavior by skipping the number crunching step. One disclaimer, there's not much of Ruby in this talk. There's some Ruby at the end, but I'm not going to include any code samples or something like that. Yeah, so that's me. I work with Jombe.com, where we are building an intelligent software for behavioral evaluation of job candidates. I lead the engineering effort there. Yeah. So how many people remember this? This is from XKCD. Okay, nobody. That's disappointing. All right. So this XKCD talks about the Google results for various phrases. You see a lot of trends over there. If you go to XKCD, the URL is printed vertically, xkcd.com/715. If you go there, a good thing about XKCD is XKCD reveals the real crux of the comic by the hint of that comic. So if you hover on that comic, you'll get the hint of it. And it says that I don't really care about the numbers. It's all the same. Let's move on to a Google Analytics dashboard. That's how an analytics dashboard looks like. So you'll see a lot of numbers there. Most of us might have seen this, I hope. So what are we exactly looking for? When we look at all these numbers, when we check these numbers, what are we exactly looking for? Are we really looking for numbers? Or are we looking for action items? The real difference between a dashboard of your website or a Google Analytics dashboard and the dashboard of this aircraft is that the dashboard of your website gives you numbers, while the dashboard of an aircraft gives you actions. It gives you buttons to start the airplane, it gives you buttons or throttles to take off, to land, and it's all about actions. It doesn't give you the number that you got to fly this plane at this altitude or stuff like that. The numbers which you get from the Google Analytics dashboard, they are usually used to deduce action items. For example, if you see that the bounce rate of your website is going too high, you might come up with a conclusion that some feature is not catching up, and you got to do some A/B testing on your pages and revamp your website a little bit. The funny part is the deductions are left to humans. You don't have a system in Google Analytics which can tell you that this page is not working well. Now, here's an example of how you would deduce conclusions or get actions out of numbers. So I've given some numbers here. You have 1,000 friends in your social network, 300 friends from your high school, 500 friends from grad school, out of which 50 are your colleagues. 73% replies to posts by 80% friends from your high school. That means a higher percentage of replies to your posts are from the high school. 47% replies to posts by 60% friends from grad school, 15% replies to posts by 2% colleagues. 60% of your friends live in the same location as mine. Now, these are too many numbers. What sense are you making out of it? The real answer that you're looking for is, I just want to go watch a movie. Whom do I go with? Let's get to a slightly formal example. 100,000 monthly users of the website, 70,421 registered users, average 3 minutes attention span per user, 7% conversion from free to premium subscriptions, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of numbers there. I want to beta test my premium feature that will go viral. And I want to know the exact target audience whom I should send my email campaigns to. How do I get these answers? I need to do all the math on my own. So analytics are useless unless acted upon. What does this mean? If you get numbers but you don't know what to do about them, those analytics are useless. If you keep looking at the dashboard and if you don't know what to do about that bounce rate or what to do about your conversion rate or what does your average revenue per user indicate, is your company growing or is your company going to die? You don't have a clue about what to do with those analytics unless you act upon them. Now, I'm a fan of XKCD. Here's one more XKCD. So this guy here wants to watch a cat video. Now there's a lot of things that go in the background, and he's just imagining that an x64 processor is screaming along billions of cycles per second to run a kernel which is frantically working through all the POSIX specified abstraction and all that. Now, does this really make sense when you're watching a cat video? It doesn't, right? But in the end, he thinks like, he's the god because he knows all those numbers. But in the end, we are looking for abstraction. Even when we talk about object-oriented principles, we talk about abstraction. Why do we need abstraction? Because we want to get the work done. We don't want to bother about the nitty-gritties of what goes inside. We don't want to bother about the numbers anymore. Let's take a real-life example. You want to travel from Pune to Jammu and Kashmir. What do? You open your phone, you open an app in your phone, a weather application, you find the temperature, you find the humidity. Probably you figure out some restaurants, probably if Zomato has their presence in the city where you want to go, you figure out the hotels which are there. What is the answer that you're looking for? The answer that you're looking for is actually whether the weather out there is going to suit me or not. The food out there is as per my taste. So you want to get those answers, and for that you have been conditioned to go by numbers. Are we really solving the real problems? By giving out numbers using a CRM software, are we really solving a real problem of increasing the average revenue per user? Are we really giving analytics which make sense, which give actionable insights? I'll jump to the graph database here. This is a textbook definition of what a graph database is. I'm just going to read it out. Graph database is a database that uses graph structures with nodes, edges, and properties to represent and store data. Usually when you use a traditional database, you don't usually get the adjacent nodes when you fetch a record. You don't get the relationships between adjacent records. You got to fetch them explicitly. A graph database will give you all that inherently. Here's another definition which has come from the most popular database, graph database called Neo4j. I'm sure some of you might have heard of it. So what is a graph database? It manages a graph. And what is a graph? It records data in nodes and relationships. Nodes can be interchangeably called vertices. Relationships can be called edges. Both nodes and edges have properties where you actually store data. A sequence, an ordered set of nodes is called a path. For example, if you consider the map of Pune, all the hotels are the nodes. And if you want to construct a path while setting out of your home, you want to check out all the hotels on your way, you'll construct a sequence of all those hotels which fall on your way. So that's a path. Yeah, so that's pretty much about what a graph database is. I'm running a little bit faster here because I want to keep some time for the questions. I'll talk now about Tinkerpop Stack. What is Tinkerpop Stack? Anyone here who has heard about Tinkerpop? Okay. So Tinkerpop is in open source software products in the graph space, which means there are a few other graph databases which have been proprietary and which have been around for a while now. It's not a new jargon, it's not a new database. It has been around for a while, just that it has been proprietary so far. Tinkerpop has made an effort to bring it in the open source space. What Tinkerpop gives you is a stack which does pretty much everything. Pipes are used for data flow processing. Gremlin is a traversal language. What SQL is for MySQL, Gremlin is for Blueprints graph databases. Frames are object graph mapper, it's like an ORM layer. Furnace is something which holds the graph algorithms. I'm sure most of us might have heard of algorithms like, the ones which you use to solve traveling salesman problem. You use Dijkstra's algorithm, you use Bellman-Ford algorithms, you use centrality algorithms, you use eigenvector centrality, you use betweenness centrality. All these graph algorithms can be pre-fed to a graph database and can simply called upon a few parameters. Another interesting thing which Tinkerpop Stack gives, which nobody else gives, is Rexter. Rexter is a REST server so that the database is exposed over an HTTP REST API, which indicates that you can pretty much use a graph database on any platform that you want to use. Tinkerpop Stack is built in Java, but having a REST API removes the limitation of using a Java derivative for using a graph database. So you can effectively use it with Ruby with a simple net HTTP or an HTTP party gem. All of this is exposed over an API, which in general is called the Blueprints API. Here's a list of Blueprints graph database. You will be amazed of how many databases are there, and we've not even heard of, at least I didn't hear about MongoDB implementation of MongoDB graph until yesterday. So yeah, there's a list of all the Blueprints graph databases. If you want to check it out, it's there on the GitHub wiki of Tinkerpop Blueprints. The most popular here is Neo4j. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Neo4j before. Then another one which I would like to quote is OrientDB and Titan. Both these databases come with a cluster environment when you can actually shard a graph. We'll speak more about it later. Yeah. Moving on to what are the problems that you want to solve when you are working on a product or when you're working on a web product. So let's consider the problem of creating a social network website. Let's see how it goes with RDBMS. And RDBMS will go with some tables, some foreign keys, some primary keys, a few join tables, and you're done with data modeling. Now comes querying. Get all posts created by my friends. So that involves a join followed by a nested select query. This is a nightmare. It can be optimized, I know, but any layman would think of a query like that. Let's get a little bit more into the querying business. Get a list of people you may know. How many of us have seen a right segment in Facebook which says people you may know? Yeah? Everyone. So if you want to find the people you may know, I'll give you a simple algorithm. The batchmates from your high school who are not in your friends list, but who have commented on posts made by your friends who are also your batchmates. That's a very simple algorithm to find out the people you may know. Now, what do you do in an SQL scenario where you have such a schema? Yeah, you'll have to run through multiple joins, and just to figure out your batchmates from high school will need a join. Then you want to filter out the friends, the people who are not in your friend list. You'll have to go to this join table which says user friendship. I don't know what it means. Then you'll have to go to the post table, the comments table, and then you'll have to crunch some numbers and get some numbers to get the people you may know. So what do? You go to Job. Now, coming to how or when do I need graphs? The point I'm trying to make here is, when your data is heterogeneous, you might have seen there's a user, there's a high school admission, there's a post, there's a comment, there's a friendship. All these are heterogeneous entities. These are not homogeneous tables. If you want to make some sense across these tables, you're going to need joins. That's where RDBMS falls short. So the first point is you need heterogeneous data. Your data has to be interconnected. The reason why Job came in was because the data was highly interconnected. We were scared of all those joins. And Job just came in, I can't make those many joins. Come on, right? So yeah, so the data is interconnected, and the most important, data needs to be navigated. Just having an interconnected data doesn't satisfy the use case of using a graph database. You might still have a highly interconnected data, but you still need a tabular lookup. You don't need graphs for that. If you really want to navigate your data, you should use graphs. The sample use cases are a social network, the one which we just saw, geospatial or location-based solutions. If you look at a map is composed of places, points of interest, and routes connecting them. This naturally translates to a graph. Every point of interest, a POI, translates to a node. Every route connecting to more than one node translates to a path or on an edge. People use graph databases for recommendations. People use graph databases for predictive analysis and time series analysis. So in the initial slides, we spoke about, I spoke about the numbers and the behavior or the kind of answers that we're looking for. Let's assume a real life scenario where the administration has census data for the last 5 years. And now they want to carry out measures of planning your stoplights, stoplights, based on the census. They know the road density, they know the traffic density for the last 5 years. They've observed it. And now they want to make a prediction of what all places will be needed to, the traffic stoplights will need to be installed at what places in the city. That's where a graph database can give you an answer that, these are the exact spots where you need to install your traffic spotlights. Now let's try to solve the problem or the query using a graph-based approach. A fundamental difference that you can see here is all the joins have been reduced to edges. A graph database gives you that interconnectivity inherently through edges. The fact that you can store properties on edges allows you to store meta information on when that edge was created and all sorts of data. So for example, here you can see that there's a nose relationship between a user and a user, a self relationship. So you can also figure out, since when this guy is friends with someone else. When did I attend the high school? What was my tenure at the high school? Graphs are whiteboard friendly. Whatever you'll draw on the whiteboard, you'll end up modeling it in the graph database. Now let's get to the querying. Finding all batchmates from high school, not in my friends list, who commented on posts made by batchmates on my friends list. Slight disclaimer, there's a complex querying language coming up. That's Gremlin for you. This is the querying language which you use for querying a graph database. You start from the high school. Seems like the high school is the pivot element in that query. Everything revolves around the high school. So you identify your central node. You start from the high school. You get all the people that attended. Now think of it as a natural scenario. I want to find out people who may know. I don't have Facebook. I don't have internet. What is the most natural thing I would do? I would go to the high school and check the records for all my batchmates. Then I will check who, out of those batchmates, who are the ones who are already there in my contacts list, and who are the batchmates who are in touch with those batchmates. So that's what we are doing here. First we go to the high school, then we see who all attended high school around the same start and end date as I did. And then I just name it as batchmates. Then from those batchmates, I filter out the friends or the people who know me as my friends. Then from those people, I go to the posts that these guys created. From the posts, I go to the comments which were created on those posts. Now there could be a lot of people who are commenting on those posts. There could be people who are not even my batchmates. But I am just bothered about my batchmates, so I just retain the batchmates and I exclude my friends out of it. I just want the people who are not in my friends list. So this sounds pretty logical. It sounds natural. You are using verbs here, real verbs. You are not using foreign keys. You are not using user underscore ID or left underscore user underscore ID or right underscore user underscore ID. The fact about pipes is the way we chain active relation calls in Ruby on Rails. You can actually chain all the Gremlin queries. So whatever you saw here, that can be combined into one single query and fired on the graph database. The reason why this is efficient is because in the first query itself, you have reduced the search space to your high school. You further go on trimming the graph by adding constraints that I want the people who attended school during my tenure. Then you trim it further, you get all the friends. Then you trim it further, you get all the friends, or all the batchmates who are not my friends. So yeah, so you can actually chain all those calls and fire it in one go. You don't have to fire multiple queries, or you don't have to go into nesting, or you don't have to go into joins. This enables us to stay close to our use case. Whenever we are discussing entity relationships, or whenever we are discussing the use case that I want to build a social network, I want to solve a problem of people you may know, I never deviate from the topic. I never talk about foreign keys. I never talk about constraints. All I talk about are relationships. You speak your business logic as you query the database. List of people you may know, again the use case. You're speaking the query language and actually you're translating it into a query that gets fired on the graph database. If you might have noticed, we didn't go through any numbers during this computation. We didn't really care about the numbers. We didn't really care about the number of friends that are associated with an entity. We didn't care about the number of joins that are going in. We didn't care about the numbers. Sure, we might come up with numbers when we want to prioritize those people. You may know we want to rank them, but I'm sure there'll be a graph traversal which can allow you to assign weights with a weighted graph, and we can go further without bothering much about the numbers and caring more about the behavior or the use case that we want to satisfy. Are you solving a problem with big data? So with big data comes massive destruction. You need a huge infrastructure. You need a huge setup. You need a complex setup. I've seen people struggling with their MapReduce algorithms. So my suggestion would be try to prefer good data than big data. What is good data? Good data is structured data. Don't rely on text blobs, resumes, multimedia content, or a nested hash. You might have a document store with a deeply nested hash, but there's no way to query it. You'll lose on efficiency. You structure it well, you'll be able to query it faster. If your product allows the users to fill in profiles, to conduct surveys, to track application events in a granular fashion, that's how you are collecting structured data and you can leverage it. Graph databases allow you to collect structured data via edges and vertices. You can obviously store granular information using individual edges or nodes and connect them together to make some sense out of it. Eventually, data analysis and decision making becomes much efficient with structured data. I think all of us would agree on that. A text mining problem is much harder to crack than having a structured input. Most big data problems can be solved by leveraging good data. This is the question which I usually get at conferences and meetups. Are graph databases the future of databases? This sounds like a cool idea. Is this going to dominate all sorts of databases that are there? No. Graph databases are meant for specific purposes. The three reasons why you should use graph databases are if your data is heterogeneous, if it is highly interconnected, and if you really want to navigate that data. That's the only three criteria which satisfy the use of a graph database. Now this is something interesting, going on the lines of whether graph databases are the future. Graph databases are a part of the future. 10 years ago, we just had one type of database. We had just a relational database. We had MS SQL or we had just MySQL. Right now, we are having several databases. Each of them have their own strengths. Martin Fowler has pointed out a term called polyglot persistence, where you use each database to its advantage. If you see, Redis is being used for user sessions because of the fast lookups and key value style of looking up. RDBMS is used for financial data because you want to rely on transactions, you don't want to lose out on asset constraints. React is being used for a shopping cart, while recommendations are being consumed or are being produced from Neo4j. So this is where the graph database comes in. If you think that graph database can solve all your problems, you might not want to use it as your primary data store. If your use case consists of recommendations or if your use case consists of predictive analysis, that's when you should go for a graph database. Right, now moving on to the real business, what's in it for Ruby? So to give some background, I have been working on Ruby for the last 3 years, and I've been working on graph databases for the last 2 years. Ever since I started using a graph database, it was in Ruby. I've been building plugins and gems on Ruby. There's a lot of other bindings available. Now, let's go with why should we go with graph database and Ruby. So as Matt said, Ruby is nice. Ruby community is nice. We just established that graphs are good. Ruby plus graphs can make a great combination. This is a list of Ruby bindings that is available out there. Neography is a Ruby gem which gives you a REST API binding for Neo4j. Neo4j is one of the most popular graph databases, so you'll find a lot of development happening on Neo4j front. Neo4j.rb is another gem which allows you to talk to an embedded Neo4j instance. Neo4j is built in Java, so you can embed it in any JRuby on Rails application, and you can talk to it right from your JRuby application using Neo4j.rb. Neo4j.rb gives you a DSL, which allows you to talk to the database in the graph language. Then there's an active record Neo4j adapter, which again speaks to Neo4j over REST, but this allows ARIAL bindings, something like user.where ID equal to something, dot select, dot something else, and you can always execute Gremlin scripts on top of it. There's a Rexter Ruby gem. Rexter is a horizontal REST server for all graph databases. There's a Ruby binding for that also. So the reason why all this has been made possible is because of the REST API. As long as your application understands JSON, you can make it talk to any graph database, any Blueprints graph database. Then there are two more plugins which are still not open sourced. I'm planning to open source them in the near future. One is Acts as Graphable. So if we go back to the polyglot persistence slide, here we need a high degree of data redundancy. If you're storing some user data in Neo4j and you're storing some billing data in your RDBMS, you will have to create a redundant bridge between the two databases. You will have to keep those databases in sync. Now that's where this plugin comes in, where you just say that this model is acting as a graphable model, and it'll keep that model in sync with the graph as well as MySQL. The next plugin is Active Record Graph Relations. The way we have has-many, has-one, has HABTM relationships. We came up with plugins which can allow you has-many incoming and has-many outgoing edges on an active record model. I'll speak a little bit about the challenges when you go with graph databases in Ruby. Graph traversals can take longer if the graph is not structured well. If you're not leveraging indices on a graph, if you're not structured it well, if you have a lot of nodes which are central, which have a lot of edges coming in, your traversals can take longer. Because MRI until 1.9 has been single-threaded, your real-time requests will suffer because of latency in your graph traversals. The second point which I would like to mention is because of single threading, even the graph database which are capable of parallel processing like Titan or OrientDB. Titan is one graph database which supports sharding of graphs. It can support Cassandra and HBase as the data backend, as the data store, and it can support MapReduce algorithms on top of graph traversals. So that allows you to get a combination of good data and big data. When your good data grows so big that you can't compute it in one go, you can actually distribute your computation and carry it in parallel. But the fact that MRI doesn't support multi-threading limits us from using them. We also contemplated on building a JRuby equivalent of Scala's play framework's promise future suspend style, where you send a request, wait on the response asynchronously, initiate a different thread, and carry it in a multi-threaded fashion. We also explored evented I/O with thin Puma instead of a synchronous I/O, just to boost performance. But again, the bottom line is, if your traversals are going to take longer, your real-time requests are going to get suffered, and the number of concurrent users you're serving with your Rails application is going to take a hit. What I propose after this talk is, because so much development has been going on in Ruby gems and Ruby plugins, can we come up with an active graph implementation on the lines of active record and active relation? Can we implement something chainable and a lazily evaluated Ruby implementation which can fire graph queries on any Blueprints database? The moment we get it done, we'll have a seamless integration with multiple Blueprints databases. If you want parallel computing, you go with Titan. If you don't want it, you go with Neo4j. You can use a combination of graph databases if this happens. Rexter recently launched RexPro, which is a binary protocol. REST has its own disadvantages because of the HTTP overhead. So if you want to make TCP connections directly to a graph database, there's RexPro. You can establish binary protocol to a graph database and get things done in a much faster way than REST. So this is what I have to propose. I'll take questions now.
Hi. Can you tell me something about graph databases in the realm of artificial neural networks?
I didn't get the latter part.
Can you tell me something about graph databases in the realm of artificial neural networks?
Artificial neural networks?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not the best person to talk about artificial neural networks, but I can talk about a little bit in the context of simulating networks in a cloud infrastructure where, I'm not really sure if this will answer your question, but there's a use case where you run a cloud infrastructure, you have been hosting WordPress blogs, you've been hosting Tumblr blogs, you've been hosting a lot of things on your system, and suddenly there's a requirement of hosting another WordPress blog. Your system already knows what the node, what is the layout of that network. A WordPress blog needs a LAMP stack. You need a PHP application, an Apache server, a load balancer, a MySQL server, and you have it laid out on your network. So that forms a subgraph, and you can actually you can actually leverage the graph database to figure out similar subgraphs in your cloud infrastructure, just to make an efficient use of your resources. So I'm not really sure if it answers the question of artificial neural networks, but there's definitely a use case where you can apply graph databases in networking.
So there's a library called Celluloid for Ruby right now that that gives you all the things that you talk about in the play framework, like futures and all that promises and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
That might be a good fit. I basically just
Sure.
wanted to bring up if you have played with something like that. Or
Sure. I think we had evaluated, we just looked into it a little bit, but we didn't really go ahead with it. But sure, we can look into it.
Is REST API still the de facto standard for connecting to graph databases? You mentioned RexPro, but usually when connecting to databases, TCP connections are the standard, and REST seems like a huge overhead. But what is the norm right now?
So I didn't quite.
My question is REST API is the de facto standard for connecting to databases right now, and RexPro is something that is coming up, or?
Yes. The reason being, they wanted to leverage the graph database as a pure database API and allow users to use Node.js or a JavaScript templating library to directly talk to a graph database. So that's where REST API came in. It's not the de facto standard because it has been implemented in Java. There's a lot of Java APIs available. There's Spring Data Graph. There's a lot of other libraries which have been built. So REST is not the de facto standard. REST is being used where Java cannot be used.
I see. Okay, thanks.
Can you share some benchmark where you used graph database with Ruby? Maybe example for like Neo4j with Ruby. Few benchmarks.
Okay, I was expecting this question and I have an answer for that. Benchmarks are subjective.
Yeah, but still, as in on some common ground basis, like you might have compared that loading same data in MySQL maybe, and then in Neo4j.
So to answer this, so TLDR, I don't have an answer for this, but to explain it in detail, what I would like to say is, unlike relational databases where you just create tables and add records to it, a graph database, the performance of a graph database lies in the way you model the graph. So if you have multiple central nodes which have a lot of adjacent nodes connecting to them, querying that kind of node is going to be expensive. Okay. So if you have modeled your database in a fashion which loads minimum nodes in memory and still be able to compute your operation, that'll yield much better benchmarks than having a super node kind of data model. Okay. So the whole creativity lies on how you model your data.
And of course the memory that you said, right? As
yes.
The memory.
Yeah, so one thing which I forgot to mention here is all these graph databases are in-memory databases and they purge data eventually to the disk. The performance of a graph database depends on the size of your graph versus the size of memory that you have allocated to that graph.
So does that mean that like if the data in my graph database grows, so I have to again like go back and change the size of the memory as in
case of databases which don't support horizontal scaling, you will have to go with vertical scaling by adding more resources. But databases like Titan or OrientDB, even Neo4j is coming up with a horizontal scaling solution in this year. So in that case, it's just a matter of adding more machines.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I just have this one basic question. So, how's the persistence actually being maintained over here? Like nodes are basically, it's a table at the end, and all your edges are kind of relationships with what we actually have in the relational databases. So, how's it kind of very different from the relational database? Like you talked about in memory and all that. But even in relational databases also, you can have stuff in memory. You kind of can have data in the memory. Plus, say when your data size actually grows, like it really kind of bombs out. So how does the graph database actually help you out over there?
So in case of a vertical scaling graph database, you don't really have much of an option than to shut down the graph database and add in more hardware and scale it. But fortunately, we now have Titan OrientDB and Neo4j is coming up with horizontal scaling solution. So in that case, you can actually deploy your infrastructure in the cloud and write your scripts to monitor your graph data size and reactively add or proactively add more nodes or more workers to your graph database. So that's how you could react to the data bloat. The previous question that you had was how is it different? In a relational database, you have tables. In a graph database, you don't have tables. Everything is a node. Everything is a node and or an edge. So the data is stored in the binary format in binary files, but it ultimately boils down to how you treat that data. So because we are so much used to tabular structures and even in MongoDB, we like to name that entity as something. In a graph database, you have just one name for every entity. So if you want to model it in that way, you have it's a no schema. It's a schema-less database. So that's the fundamental difference between a relational data store and this data store. If you want to enforce schema, you will have to write your own libraries.
Like you mentioned, connecting to a graph database, if you are working on the JVM, you'd probably use a Java connector. For other platforms, you'll have to use the REST API. In your experience, I'm guessing because of the plugins, you have been working with the REST form as well. Have you had challenges with respect to transactions when connecting to the REST API? Okay. Using REST API to connect to the graph database, how do you maintain transactions and data integrity?
Okay, so Gremlin supports transactions. You can put a Gremlin query inside a transaction, so that particular query is atomic. Every REST request is a transaction, and if you have multiple queries running in the same REST API request, you can put them in separate transactions. So that's how you achieve transactions. While using an embedded Java server, you don't really have to bother about transactions. It is inherently transactional.
Querying is one thing. What about when you're inserting data? That's where transactions become important.
So insertion is also a query.
Okay.
So you can put it in a transaction in Gremlin.
Okay, and you haven't mentioned Cypher. Any experiences of Cypher versus Gremlin?
Right. I didn't mention Cypher because I wanted to focus more on blueprints. Cypher, for people who are not aware of Cypher, Cypher is a DSL, a graph querying language which has been built by Neo4j. It works exclusively with Neo4j. It takes a functional approach. Gremlin might not be readable. Cypher is much more readable and developer friendly. If you want to go with Cypher, you can pick it up pretty well. Yeah, and one thing that differentiates Cypher with Gremlin is Gremlin has been there for a long time. So Gremlin has emerged as a much powerful interface for querying than Cypher. But Cypher is also evolving. Cypher is also catching fast. So even they have made a lot of improvements in their querying interface. They have made it much faster. They have given some things which Gremlin doesn't have right now, like match and path extractions. So they have come up with their own implementation. But it's exclusive to Neo4j. So to quote a personal example, I come from a startup background where we have to be technology agnostic. We cannot stick with one database. What if that database doesn't work out well for us? So we have to be open for all kind of graph databases to solve our use case. That's the reason why we usually go with standards than going with frameworks.
Thanks.
Okay, sorry, we can't take any more questions.
Thank you very much.